introduction for me. I'm a recently retired college professor, taught music for 35 years, was a bugler for the Boy Scouts, and a trumpet major in college, and switched over to voice in grad school, but always kept a love for the bugle and a love for the trumpet. The bugle is a very special instrument. It has a wide history that goes back thousands of years, actually. The bugle it's a symbol and a system of communication. And it's particularly loud. You have to have it very loud in order to communicate. And before the electronic age, it was the instrument in the military to communicate. And there are hundreds of bugle calls. And before I get going, a brief history, ancient cultures used natural elements to signal things. Ram's horns, for example, in the Hebraic tradition, Jericho, the walls of Jericho were brought down by ram's horns, played on shofars, what are called shofars, which are ram's horns. And cultures around the sea use what's called a conch shell, which would turn up, calcium carbonate, which would turn up on shores. And whoever it was, somebody figured out that you could blow into the end of the conch shell and make a sound. And they used this to communicate to other people and part of their cultures, and to call back and forth, and possibly to signal the start of a war, or maybe calls to peace. Who knows? But it's just the significance is that they use natural parts of nature. This eventually evolved over time into what are called hunting horns. This is a German hunting horn used to signal to different parts of the hunting party that, yes, the game is over here, the deer is over here, the fox is over here, please come in this area. And this was played in this manner, and you have to imagine riding on a horse, playing this, and trying to signal to your peers, this is the way. Very high, loud sound. The bugles are built on a fundamental tone, a basic low tone, and overtones or multiple frequencies are the notes that are played in a bugle. That's the fundamental of this horn, and there are multiple frequencies or sound vibrations above that. And they go higher, but those are the four notes used in most bugle calls. This evolved into a more sophisticated double-coiled bugle. This is an alto bugle. There's a family of bugles, a soprano bugle, and you have a wonderful picture of a soprano bugle in your program. It's very small, built for portability. This is an alto, it's a lower pitched, and they have a tenor bugle and a bass bugle. In drum and bugle corps, you'll have all four. And this is the one I'll primarily demonstrate on today. This one is equipped with a spit valve. They don't tell you about this in the books at all, but you create a lot of moisture in a bugle, and you need a valve to release that, or else you get these little blips in your sound. So I have to do this every now and then to get rid of that. But this is the regulation, U.S. regulation, Army regulation bugle. The bugle evolved into a keyed bugle. This is a cornet, but it has the same shape as the bugle, but it has different valves making the trumpet or the cornet longer or shorter, so you have more frequencies or notes to work with. And so on, but it still retains that kind of overall shape. what I've done most of my work on is the trumpet. The trumpet is thinner, longer, and has a brighter sound. And a higher sound. And notice it's really loud because it has to cover a lot of area. I'd like to take you briefly through a day in the life of a bugler. And this is pretty much the same throughout the Army, Navy, and the Air Force. They still use bugles, although today they use a digital bugle because there aren't very many buglers left who can know all the bugle calls and who can play them. I don't like them, but they're a necessary evil because, again, there are lots of reasons and places to play a bugle. You all know this one. Where's that from?
Racetrack.
Kentucky Derby. It's used to call the jockeys to their positions to take their steeds to the gate. Its original function, though, was to call the buglers in a military station setup to gather together at 5:50 in the morning. That was the call for the buglers, because the buglers then had their daily assignments. They went out into the various places and then played their bugles all day long. But that was the call for the buglers, but it's still used today. The next thing was reveille, which is the French to wake up, and it's a very common call. You have heard it, I'm sure. And that was played sharply at 6 o'clock. At the far end of the barracks, because they would always try to rush out with a bucket of water to douse on me for getting them up so early at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I made sure I was at the far end so I could play this really quickly, then run to the next station where I was supposed to play so they wouldn't get me. But that's what all the military here at 6 o'clock in the morning. And the words are, you can't get them up. You can't get them up. You can't get them up in the morning. Very famous tune. The tune that you heard first off in the celebration today at Flag Day was the call to assembly. It's used for various aspects of the military day, to call you to assemble around the flagpole as we did, to call you to a meeting, to call you to the mess hall, and it's also used in war, in battle, for a call for retreat, to come back, reassemble, and then go back out again. And you can tell by how it's played how urgent the call to assembly is. If it's played faster and louder, that means you better get there quick. There's a call. Several times as emphasis. Get there quick. The assembly I called you to this morning was to the raising of the American flag, and this is why we're honoring Flag Day. The bugle call called To the Colors is considered almost as important as the national anthem. It is associated with the flag, and there's a certain To the Colors called for raising the flag, and there's a different one for lowering the flag. This is the one you will hear around 8 o'clock in the morning when they raise the American flag. section, and then it will repeat that theme after that. So it kind of is an A-B-A. A little bit tired. Then it returns to the A section. And that's the raising of the flag. During the day, there are different elements happening, different events happening. One of my favorite calls, though, is the call to the fire alarm. And often this will come up at any time, any place on camp or military base, or even in the vicinity. There's a specific call to take your positions to fight a fire. So I gotta give my lips a little rest here. This is a tough one because it has the characteristic of energy. You have to go to your place of working with this fire, and so there's a lot of urgency with this. Short, very quick, but it's repeated several times. Of course, the most harrowing call, the most angst-producing call, the most energetic call is the one that the bugler has to play during battle. Battle. You have to charge. Tell this company, military company, to charge. And that is a huge responsibility. The buglers were close to the commanders. They would get their command from the general, and they were to relay that command to the troops. And so the buglers were the generals or the commander's right-hand men, right-hand people. And it's often asked, what happens if somebody shoots the bugler? What happens then? Well, there was a backup bugler. There was a secondary emergency bugler in case that happened. But the buglers were very, very important. And this is the charge signal used to charge the enemy. And that was repeated, of course, several times. And that was designed to get your energy up, to get your mojo going, and really get with it and go over the top. This was played in World War I and World War II. This was the instrument that was used oftentimes, and I think they did it digitally, sometimes in Afghanistan and Iraq. The next one is, next to the last call, is the lowering of the flag, around 8 o'clock in the evening. And this was the different, this is the other two of the colors, that's specifically for lowering the flag. Of course, you all know the last call. It's taps. And taps has a really interesting history. What was used as the last call up until the Civil War in 1862 was a French bugle call. It was very formal. There was no real feeling to it. And by the name of General Daniel Butterfield, early in the war, lost lots of men in a particular battle and wanted to dedicate something to his men. So he worked with his bugler, wrote taps out. And they worked on it for a couple of hours, and then the bugler played it that night. It was so well received that the other Union troops started to play taps, and the Confederates started to use taps too to end their day. Today it's used in military ceremonies to signify the end of the day, not only the end of the day, but the end of a life, and in remembrance of all the men and women who gave their life in war. It's called taps because before this new taps was written, the drums would tap 3 times after the French bugle call. So there was this French call, 3 taps of the drums, and then this new taps was written, and the name just carried over for taps. Hopefully I can get through this, because it's a very emotional, eloquent, haunting piece. Let me do that last phrase once more, okay? I mentioned before, it's a dying art, and what's played now are what are called digital trumpets, and they put a little speaker in the bell of the bugle, and you can turn it on or off, and you can't tell it's there unless you're headed straight on to the bugle player, but then all a person has to do is hold it up, and it plays it. And it plays it perfectly. But it takes the emotion out of the piece. Even the mistakes are emotional. Even the mistakes are part of the mystique and part of the aura on playing a bugle and signaling what's happening. It's been an honor honoring our flag today with the bugle. They go hand in hand. Oftentimes they're forgotten. Sometimes the bugle's forgotten. Again, because it's a dying art. But please support people, support the American Legion, support this wonderful historical society. We've come to several of their tours. Love this place. It's an architectural wonder. So I really am thankful to be a part of this. It's gotten me back in shape a little bit, but hopefully I'll be back next year to play to the colors.